What's going on, guys? It's Winter Soldier, and I'm standing on top of the True Shot Lodge today to talk to you about what you need to do to get ready for the Emerald Nightmare. Now, some of my videos, some of the criticisms have been that, I joke around a lot, and I don't really go into depth about things. And while normally I don't really give a shit what you guys think, I think I owe you guys like a formal explanation. So today, this is going to be a longer video, and I'm going to go through everything you need to know about your hunter going into the Emerald Nightmare. Alright, so first we're going to start with stats, or talents rather. Talents haven't changed since my other two videos, but I'm going to take the time to go through and explain why I choose each one. So in the first row, Lone Wolf is your best option. It not only does it do the most damage overall, but it's a lot easier to manage than the other two. It sims higher than the other two. It's your default choice. Steady Focus is what you would take if you were going to play with a pet. I mean, not really recommended. If you really wanted a pet, you could probably just play Beastmaster. It doesn't do as much damage, but it's not like super terrible. It's just not as good. Careful Aim has a very niche market to it. It's just one of those things where you choose Careful Aim only in very rare circumstances. Usually when bosses are at really high amounts of health. So, like as an example, Odin in the Halls of Valor, you only have to fight him from 100 to 80%, so this is a really good one for that. Helia from Maw of Souls, same deal, you only fight her from about 100 to 70%. So this is one of those really niche talents, but it's not going to have very many applications and rating. So currently, by sims and damage-wise, Lone Wolf is definitely the way to go. In the Tier 30 talent, you want to choose Lock and Load pretty much by default. Again, Lock and Load is going to give you bigger damage numbers. It's going to be easier to manage. You don't have to worry about the focus and extra stuff like that. True Aim is almost completely useless. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's one of the lowest talents. There's no situation in which I can see you taking True Aim at the moment. And Black Arrow is technically good for Mythic Plus and Mythic Dungeons. Your pet can act as a second tank, the shadow that you get out. It does a lot of damage over time, but you pick it in Mythic Plus because it's good for consistent amounts of damage. So like Lock and Load doesn't always proc, right? And Black Arrow is a constant source of damage, but when Lock and Load does proc, it's definitely worth taking over Black Arrow. So if you're raiding, you definitely want to go Lock and Load. If you're kind of sticking with dungeons and stuff, Black Arrow is worth picking up, for doing dungeons and world quests. This row I still don't think matters that much, but I like to keep Post Haste, especially with the first boss, Nithendria. I don't know if you guys have done the Emerald Dream or not, but Nithendria has a breath attack, and this is great for you just turn and you leap out of the way. So, in case you guys don't use Disengage that much, Disengage always kicks you in backwards the direction you're facing. So you want to turn your back to where you want to go and then hit Disengage. So a lot of times what I'll do is when Nithendra starts to cast her breath, I'll turn around and disengage safely out of her breath range. So I'm a huge fan of Post Haste because Aspect of the Cheetah is on a 3-minute cooldown, and this only increases the duration by 3 seconds, so that's not super useful to us. The next row, it's just one of those things where with our mastery now and with the way Marksmanship plays, it's really not worth taking any of the other ones. You could make an argument for Sentinels. It's supposedly, because it's consistent, you can use it to offset bad RNG. So what it does is it allows you to use Marking Shot on all your targets, but it's on a 30-second cooldown. So yeah, it's okay if you have really bad RNG with your Sidewinders and your auto shots, but it doesn't sim nearly as high as Patient Sniper. And Explosive Shot, it's first of all, it's a skill shot, and we talked about this. Hunters aren't supposed to have any skill, but it's also, not only is it a skill shot, so if you miss it, you just bought yourself a one-way ticket to fucked, but it's also not really that great And if you're in a hectic raiding environment and you're running around, shit's going down, you're not really going to want to sit there and line up your shot. Okay? It's just saying straight out. This row, again, not super important. I use this one when I'm questing out in the world because I like the heal. Wyvern Sting and Binding Shot you'll definitely want when you get up into the Mythic Plus ranges. Wyvern Sting is really great. Binding Shot in case you need to be kiting things. I use Wyvern Sting a lot for when I'm doing Mythic, 5+. Ultimately, you got to adapt to your scenario, though. So a lot of you guys are probably a little bit concerned about the recent nerf to Barrage, so we're going to talk about this real quick. These are all now pretty close, damage-wise. A Murder of Crows you're going to take on fights that are purely single target. And in the Emerald Nightmare, the only two of those kind of fights that exist are Nithendria and Ursoc. Okay, so a Murder of Crows for the first, what I would argue is the first two bosses, because you can do the other four in any order you want, but I recommend Murder of Crows for the first two bosses, which is Nithendria and Ursoc, because they are purely single target, at least on normal and heroic. Barrage is going to be your default for the rest. Volley is good damage-wise, but it's only recommended that you take Volley if you can get all of the adds really neatly stacked together. So, like, if you guys have a Blood DK and he can Gorfine's Grasp everything in, it will do more AoE damage than Barrage will. But the minute that adds start spreading outside of this range of this Volley, it starts to lose to Barrage. So I would default to Barrage. Just because it is easier to maintain. You don't have to worry about it as much, especially in raiding, and obviously the added bonus of being able to pull an entire instance and kill all your friends. I mean, Murder of Crows and Volley doesn't really offer that kind of friendship. So the last row is, again, pretty straightforward. I'm going to go right off the bat and tell you you're never going to never in any situation are you going to take Trick Shot. It's just, I don't know why Blizzard put it in here. It's not good. Okay, Piercing Shot, you could make an argument for Mythic Plus scenarios where you've got lots of AoE to do. Because you can line up the adds, and Piercing Shot again that falls under the whole you need to have skill thing. I don't really like talents that require using skill. And then Sidewinders is I don't need to tell you this guys again, but you're shooting snakes out of your bow. I don't know why you would choose anything else, but Sidewinders obviously good for single target, multi-target, spread out. Great for pulling seagulls. Great for pulling things that you thought were definitely not within the range of Sidewinders. Great for pulling things out of space. It's kind of like a mini Barrage, except instead of shooting bullets, you're shooting snakes. So there's a bonus to that. But that's the explanation for these. Again, in this row, there's never a situation where you're going to take Trick Shot. It does so little damage compared to the other ones. And Piercing Shot is kind of like, if you want to experiment. I guess you could take Piercing Shot, but Sidewinders is definitely the way to go in talents. So, next we're going to talk about stats. And again, nothing has really changed, but I figure I'll go a little bit more into depth. So, the highest priority for hunters is your weapon damage, which means you want to go into your artifact weapon and you want to be upgrading your relics with the plus item levels as much as you possibly can. That is what you're going to see the biggest increase in weapon DPS with, okay? You want plus, we talked about this in the other video, but you want the plus item levels. That is the highest priority for your relics. So if you have a plus 41 and a plus 40, you want to put the plus 41 in there no matter what the actual bonus is. Okay, like you see I've got bonuses in a couple of these. One time I had one for Gust of Wind. We talked about how useless Bursting Shot is, right? But as long as it's plus item level, that's the way to go. And hopefully you saw my other video about your artifact path, but for you marksman hunters out there, you should be going along this path. Pick up Bullseye first. You should have picked up Legacy of the Windrunners second. And you guys should actually be a little bit ahead of me if you're like hardcore Henrys. I took a couple days off, kind of regretting that now, but you should be at least 20, probably closer to like 22 points right now, so you should be well on your way to getting your last trait here. But if you have any questions about which path to take, go feel free to watch my artifact guide. Nothing has changed there with the recent patches. So, back to stats. First priority is weapon damage. That is absolutely critical for hunters, and the way to get weapon damage is to increase the item level of your artifact, so that's through relics. Next is mastery. Now this is a little bit different. Mastery is actually more important to us now than agility because of our mastery training sniper, which increases your ranged abilities by 25% and the damage of all focus spending abilities by 100%, which means it increases the range by 25%. That means, well, it stacks with your mastery, but for me it's 25%, which means I can pull 25% more seagulls, and it increases the damage by 100%. And this scales with your mastery, so it's for every percent mastery you have, you get 1% range, give or take, and you get 4% extra damage. So mastery is huge. It's actually even more important right now than agility, and that is on purpose, because if you noticed, Blizzard hasn't included primary stats on rings and necklaces. So they've made mastery for hunters really, really good. And now that mastery stacks with your windburst correctly, it's very important that you go mastery first. Okay? So stat priorities are mastery first, then agility. No, sorry, weapon damage. We talked about that. Mastery, agility, haste, critical strike, and versatility. Okay? And the reason for that, the reason haste is above critical strike is almost threefold. So the more haste you have, the shorter your global cooldowns are. The shorter your global cooldowns are, the more abilities you can get in. The more abilities you can get in, the more damage you're going to do. It also reduces the cooldown of your abilities. Again, follows the same path. Reduce cooldown, more abilities. It also increases your auto attack. And the more you auto attack, the higher your chances for Sidewinders are to proc. And everybody knows that Sidewinders is where you do all your damage. So obviously it's important to try to get that to proc as many times as you can. So that helps there. Additionally, haste also increases your focus regeneration, which means you can start fitting more abilities in. And once you hit a certain haste cap, you can fit 3 or 4 aim shots for every Sidewinders window, which obviously will increase your damage even further. So that's why haste edges out crit, is because of all the interactions it has with Sidewinders, essentially, and it reduces your cooldowns, it makes you attack faster, it's all around, it's the better stat. Critical strike is great for AoE situations. There's not really much we have to talk about. It just, when you crit, it increases your chance to double your damage, right? And that stacks with your bullseye trait that we got in our artifact weapon, so that helps a lot. And rapid killing also increases your critical strike by 50% when you use your true shot. So critical strike is good, it's just not quite as good as haste, but they are very close. And again, I recommend you download Pawn and put these weights in, and you'll know exactly what items to pick up. And versatility, obviously, is just, nobody likes talking about versatility. It's boring as shit. It just increases your damage. It's the lowest of our priorities. It's pretty garbage. And that's pretty much it for stats. There's not much more we can talk about here. Why mastery and ranged weapon DPS is important. It's because you do physical damage, so you want to increase as much of your physical damage as you can. So, I don't have any legendaries right now, but the 2 legendaries, ideally, that you'd want to be shooting for are called Ulfir's Snow Boots. Those are the best ones you want. And the next best set you can get is called the War Belt of the Sentinel Army. So the snowshoes, it's called Uller's Feather Snowshoes, reduces the cooldown of True Shot by 1 second each time you cast a damaging ability. So essentially it will reduce the cooldown of True Shot anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds, which because True Shot is our best cooldown, that's really, really good. So the boots are the best. The next best one you can get is the War Belt, which causes enemies hit by Sidewinders to increase damage done by the next aim shot by 10%, stacking up to 20 times. That's really good for single target, but super powerful for AoE scenarios, because everything that gets hit by Sidewinders is going to start taking... it's going to increase the damage of your aim shot. So if you hit 10 enemies with your Sidewinders and you have that belt on, it's going to increase the damage of your aim shot by 100%. So you can start to see why that's really crazy. And then the third best one is the ring. It's called Zevrim's Hunger, and it just flat out increases your mark shot damage by 15%. Sorry, it doesn't increase it. It makes mark shot have a 15% chance not to remove Hunter's Mark, which if you guys can just keep spamming mark shot and it's not removing Hunter's Mark, you're going to do so much damage. I know it's only a 15% chance, but that would be really good, because you guys know that mark shot does a ton of damage. Now, that's not to say that all the other legendaries are useless. They're just not as good, right? You know, we don't want the mask or the pants that help us heal, because you shouldn't be taking damage, because we're better than that. But those are the ones you want to aim for. The feather snowshoes, the War Belt, the Sentinel Army, and Zevrim's Hunger. If you get one of those three, you're golden, especially the snowshoes. So, I'm going to talk briefly about trinkets. There's not much to say here. All the trinkets are good. Some of them are better than others. You want to be shooting for Naraxis' spiked tongue. And that drops out of Neltharion's lair off of the big worm guy. This is the trinket you really want, especially if you can get it up to like 840 plus. Because not only does it give you mastery, but the effect on it is really good for hunters. It procs plenty. It's currently one of the highest simming trinkets that there is. If you guys got a ton of cash, you should be picking up the 6-feather fan off the auction house. Try to aim for 840 plus. That's the second highest trinket at the moment. For sims and damage, it's really, really good, but it's also really expensive. It's usually around 200,000 gold. I might pick it up. I haven't decided yet. There is a trinket currently in the Emerald Nightmare that drops off Ursoc. It's called the Bloodthirsty Instinct, and I know that the tooltip says that your melee attacks have a chance to increase your haste, but Blizzard has said multiple times in blue posts that this also procs for ranged, and this currently is the best trinket you can get from Emerald Nightmare for hunters. This trinket is it's essentially what it is you have a chance to trigger a Bloodlust on yourself, which is really, really strong. So if you're doing Emerald Nightmare and this trinket drops, make sure you roll for it. And if your raid leader is like, it says melee only, you just got to be like, no, trust me, Blizzard says it can proc on ranged attacks as well. This has been tested. I promise you, I give you the Winter Soldier promise that this procs on ranged attacks. And this is our best in slot trinket. So you need to pick up this trinket off of Ursoc. Don't let the melee try to talk you out of it. Other than that, it's just common sense, right? So these trinkets actually are really good, the ones that have just your two main stats on them. So I have this one here that's Agility Mastery. It's actually a really good trinket. Just the consistency of the mastery, and we talked about how good those stats are, it beats out most procs. And you can get this in several versions. We've got the Tit statue. We've got the Poison Ivy statue, the one. You can get the Three-Toed Rabbit's Foot Mastery. You can get the Mana Crystal Mastery. Basically, all of the trinkets that just give you stats are all the same, and they're also really good. So you want to have, usually, unless you have those three trinkets we already mentioned, which is Bloodthirsty Instinct, the Spiked Tongue, or the 6-feather fan, you want one of your trinkets to be one of these stats one if you can get it high enough. And then I'll just mention a couple other good ones that I happen to have. Stormsinger's Fulmination is really good because it increases your mastery by a bunch. That's way up there. Probably that's a top 10 trinket. Tarathian's Betrayal, if you can get it in 840 plus, is a pretty good trinket. Hunger of the Pack. If you guys want more information about which trinkets you should be choosing, you can check out the Sims on icyveins.com under the simulation section. And he has a great list, as Thorian made a great list of where all the trinkets are simming. And yeah, that's about it for trinkets and stuff. So we'll talk briefly about enchants next. If you're going into some serious raiding, you're going to want to pick up enchants. They can be pretty costly. We'll talk about flasks and stuff too, but what you want to be shooting for is obviously mastery on your rings. Yeah, I know, I got the poor people's version. You want agility on your cloak. And the neck enchant you're aiming for is Mark of the Trained Soldier. So, Mark of the Hidden Satyr is a better enchant for purely single target, but the next best one for single target is Trained Soldier, and then Mark of the Claw is better for AoE, but Mark of the Trained Soldier is the next best one, so you should just go for Mark of the Trained Soldier. It's not the best in either category, but it's the second best in both categories, which makes it a good, in-between choice. So I recommend getting Mark of the Trained Soldier, and all that does is it increases your mastery by 300. So it's essentially just some straight-up mastery bonus. Gems, you want to go for the 150 masteries. It's been kind of hotly debated whether or not you want to stick the agility gems in there. I personally do not. I like the mastery more than the agility. Technically, you're supposed to use the agility ones, but that's a judgment call. Yeah. Let's see. For food, right now I got me some Barracuda Murgle Gurgle, which increases my mastery by 300%. But you can also use the Nightborn Delicacy Platter, which gives you 375, so that's ideal. The ideal mastery for multi-target fights. If you're doing pure single target, you want to use the Fish Brule Special, which is kind of the same as the Fell Fish from the last expansion, but it launches, you breathe fireballs. It's pretty nice. It's only if you're doing pure single target will you do the Fish Brule Special, but otherwise, Nightborn Delicacy Platter for the mastery, or the Barracuda Murgle Gurgle, which is cheaper and easier to make. I wouldn't worry about augment runes right now. The flask that you want to be using is called Flask of the Seventh Demon. It's pretty straightforward. It gives you 1300 agility, and the potions that you guys want to be popping at the beginning of a fight are called the Potion of Deadly Grace, which, again, makes you attack for additional damage. So one thing you guys should know, in case you didn't know this already, I don't know what level rating you guys are all at, but you want to pop a potion before combat, and then again after 20%. So the way it works is if you use a potion in combat, you can only use one. But if you pop a potion just before you pull, it doesn't count as being in combat, so you can use a second potion. So when the timer hits 3, you want to use Potion of Deadly Grace, then you want to Wind Burst, and then you want to open up with True Shot, Barrage, and then go into your rotation, which I'm going to go over again, but we'll skip over that for now. So remember to get, if you really want to start pushing your damage out, remember to get 2 potions per every time you kill a boss. And guys, I know they're expensive. Hold on to them for your first couple attempts on each boss. Unless you know for sure that you guys are going to get the boss, don't waste your potions. They're too expensive. These Flasks of the Seventh Demon, they're 2,000 gold on my server, but they last for an hour, so it's, you got to do what you got to do. But in terms of target DPS, this is really, people a lot of times will ask me, they're like, oh, what damage should I be doing for this item level? And it's tough to say. At 847, which I just got to today, I know it's not super great, but I'm prioritizing better gear over item level. I do single target fights. Like when I did Heroic Nethendria, I did about 225,000 damage per second by the end of the fight. You should be bursting for 500 or more, but over a long boss fight, you should even out. You should be aiming for at least 200,000 DPS as single target for Heroic. Then you talk about fights like Illigoth, which is just a hunter's wet dream, and you're fucking sidewindering and barraging everywhere, and you don't have to worry about pulling any seagulls. You should be doing like 300, 350,000 DPS on that fight. I love Illigoth. Dungeons, you should still be in the 200k range for single target. The more adds you add, the more damage you should be doing. I wouldn't worry about it too much. If your gear is low, you can worry about that later, but that's where I am right now. So when I do World of Logs, that puts me at about the 80 to 90 percentile bracket, so that's pretty damn good. You want to be aiming for right around 200. That's what I would consider to be kind of standard for hunters and going into at least Heroic. So that's about it in terms of like what getting ready for it. Obviously, know your fights. I talked about the talents. So with Nethendria and Ursoc, you want to switch to Murder of Crows. Other than that, you want to keep Barrage. There's not a whole lot of variance in Emerald Nightmare about what you should be using. This really is the only row that's going to change in the Emerald Nightmare about like what talents you want to switch to. So Murder of Crows for the first two bosses because they're purely single target. Then you want to use Barrage for the rest of them. It's not much to it than that. If you guys have already seen my other Marksmanship videos, you can probably end the video now because I'm going to just be going over the rotation. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'll go over it a little bit slower, but that's all to it. If you guys are dropping out now, thanks for watching. I hope this was in depth enough for you guys. If you still need any clarification on stuff, feel free to leave me a comment. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to those. I would put together some boss-specific guides for hunters, but there's not like a whole lot of things you can cheese. There's a lot of cool things you can do, like in Nethendria. All of the bosses you can use Aspect of the Turtle to like really help your raid out. I might make a video about that actually, about where you should be using Aspect of the Turtle to like save your raid from a lot of mechanics. But for now, I'm just gonna go into the rotation, and we are gonna go from there. So if you guys are dropping out, thanks for watching. So the rotation. I know I've already put out 2 videos about this, but I'll go over it again. So we talked about you want to use your potion before you pull. On a boss fight, you want to be potted up, you want to have all your food. I'm not going to do that, but right now I'm just going to show you a couple tricks to get the rotation down. So the priority on hunter rotation is pretty straightforward. Okay, Mark Shot is always to be used when it's available. Then you always want to use Barrage. You want to aim for always using Windburst. And then you have these Sidewinder vulnerable windows that we're going to get into that are really the bulk of the rotation. So if I were about to do a pull on a boss, I would pop my potion, I would cast Windburst, I'd do True Shot into Barrage, then I would Sidewinders, I'd get in an aim shot, I'd use a Mark Shot, then I'd want to get in 2 aim shots before this vulnerable expires, okay? Then I would Mark Shot again, I'd fit in 1 aim shot, I would Mark Shot, and I want to fit in 2 more aim shots before this vulnerability window ends. Now my Barrage is up, so first I'm going to Barrage on cooldown, then I'm going to use Windburst, and then I'm going to rinse and repeat, right? Sidewinders, into aim shot, into Mark Shot, and then try to fit in 2 aim shots if I can. And that's pretty much the rotation, guys. There's only a few tricky things about the rotation here, and that is with the interaction with Windburst. So Windburst I recommend only using when you do not have vulnerability on the target. And what that means is when you have Sidewinders up, and when it's glowing yellow when you hit it and it applies vulnerability, that is not the time to be using Windburst. Okay, you want to wait. A good time to use it is, let's say I'm doing my rotation, right? I do my Sidewinders, I got my aim shot in, my mark shot, my 2 aim shots. See how my Sidewinders hasn't procced? I'm going to go right into a wind burst there because vulnerability has fallen off the target. Right? That is when you want to be using your wind burst. You want to try to use it on cooldown, but you don't want it to overlap with vulnerability. So it's okay to wait 3 or 4 seconds to use wind bursts as long as you're not going to be wasting your vulnerability procs. Now the cool thing is, like you just saw with lock and load, I can fit in 2 aim shots before I do my mark shot, and then 2 more aim shots. So that's always cool. But the thing is you definitely want to use your mark shot while the target is vulnerable, because vulnerable, this debuff, increases the damage taken from mark shot and aim shot, but mark shot does more damage than aim shot. So the reason we do the rotation like this, where we go mark shot, 1 or 2 aim shots, and then a second, and then mark shot, is because you want that mark shot to benefit from your vulnerable debuff. Because not only does it extend the vulnerable debuff by 3 seconds or 6 seconds, but it also does more damage. So it's more important that you get off an aim shot or a mark shot than it is for you to get off another aim shot. So if you're really low on haste and you mark a target, you want to be using you definitely want to use your mark shot before this vulnerable window applies. So like I can't do this. Let's see if we can go for 3 aim shots here, right? I'm gonna go for my 3rd aim shot, and by the time I go, I can't do my mark shot with vulnerable on the target. That is how, if you want to know how hunters are gonna do the most damage, it's definitely getting in that mark shot while the target is vulnerable. Absolutely focus on that. Okay, that and barrage are gonna be your biggest sources of damage. So wind burst when you don't have vulnerable on the target, mark shot when it glows yellow, or now here's the tricky bit. If this hits 2 stacks and it's not lit up, you still got to press it, because you don't want to let, that's time where it could be recharging for an useful mark shot. So if this counter hits 2 and you haven't, it's not lighting up, you still got to hit it, because that's you want it to be constantly recharging. It's the same way runes work for Death Knights. So see, this hasn't, well, bad example. If that had hit 2 and it wasn't yellow, I was still going to use it. So just a quick summary of the rotation, right? You start off the fight, you potion at 3, wind burst, true shot, barrage, sidewinders, fit in an aim shot, get your mark shots in, get your aim shots in before this window expires, sidewinders again. Let's get our lock and loads in there. We're going to mark shot. We're going to fit our aim shots in before this expires. Our barrage is about to come off cooldown. We're going to use that first. Then we're going to use our wind burst. Then we're going to have sidewinders, aim shot. We're going to get our mark shot in before this vulnerability window expires. We're going to fit in 2 more aim shots. And there, see? It hit 2, but it's not yellow, so I got to use it, right? You're not going to get your mark shots, but you got to get it in there. And you got to, if you're hitting max focus, you need to be dumping your aim shots. But that's very rare. It's very rare that Sidewinders doesn't proc pretty quickly. It's going to feel a little weird to you guys, because there's going to be times in long boss fights where you're sitting there literally not pressing anything. Your Sidewinders is going to be down. You're not going to have enough focus for aim shots. Your wind shot and your barrage are going to be on cooldown, and you're going to be sitting there for like 4 or 5 seconds just auto-attacking. Don't panic. That's normal. Okay? Most of Hunter's damage doesn't come from the amount of abilities you use. It's the amount of abilities you can snapshot into your vulnerability window. So don't just spam your Sidewinders if you've got nothing. If you've got nothing to press, just don't press it. Wait for your focus to pool back up. Wait for something to come off cooldown, and then start doing your damage that way. Okay, so don't be out there panicking. Like if you get to this point. Let's see if I can get this in the rotation. My aim shot, my mark shot's gonna get barrage here. There we go. We can proc Sidewinders. Go fit in some here. It's not proc for me. Let's get our Sidewinders in. Fit in 1 aim shot. Do our mark shot. Fit in 2 more aim shots here. Now we're going to use Sidewinders. Barrage is off cooldown, so we're going to want to use that. We're going to use Sidewinders. We're going to use Aim Shot, Mark Shot, try to fit in some aim shots here. Good. Here, now we had nothing to do. Oh, God, this just keeps... I just am too lucky with my rotation. It needs to stop. The moral of the story is don't be... If you hit windows where you're not doing anything, it's okay. Because you're not going to be losing out on damage. You're actually going to be making yourself worse off if you're spamming your abilities when it's not time to use them. Okay? So that's about it for the rotation. I hope that helps. Here. See, I got nothing to press right now. And it's okay. I don't need to press anything until my things come off cooldown. It is absolutely fine. And that's about it for the rotation, guys. I tried to be as in-depth as I can. The only other thing that I'm going to make a video about is your aspect of the turtle and your heal, okay? I know we joke around on this channel a lot about how you shouldn't be taking damage and how it's not your job to heal yourself, and it's really funny, but when you're in a raiding environment, try to help out your healers as much as you can. If you fuck up and you step in something and you take a massive amount of damage, or you're hit by a mechanic that you shouldn't have been, just heal yourself back up. Don't put that kind of strain on your healers, okay? A 30% heal to yourself is huge. That way the healers don't go into panic mode and start dumping really big things on you. And the other thing is Aspect of the Turtle. And like I said, I'll make a video about this, but you can cheese so many mechanics with Aspect of the Turtle and just make your life so much easier. So like as an example, in Nithendra, you can pop Aspect of the Turtle and you can sit and rot when you got the debuff, and you can drop your rot on somebody else's rot, which doesn't sound like much, but when you have a bunch of people in your raid dropping rot, the fact that you're not taking up any more space is really good. I'll make a video about it. Obviously, be using your counter shot, because interrupting, you know, you take for granted how awesome good people are who are interrupting. Just make it second nature. If you see a cast bar, interrupt it. If you see somebody about to heal, you know, interrupt it. Stuff like that. And that's about it, guys. I hope that was in-depth enough. The video sure as hell is long enough. If you guys have any more questions, like I said, leave them in the channel. I promise you I know what I'm talking about. I'll try to get back to them. And I hope you appreciate the fact that I'm still not using any crappy dubstep. And if you like this video, comment, subscribe, send it to the hunters in your guild if they need some help. I'm usually around on the Hunter Discord to help out. Be a little wary with the Hunter Discord. They're a bunch of grumpy old men there. I don't blame them. They get asked the same question every day. But, yeah. You know, if you guys are on Storm Rage, feel free to whisper me too. I can help out wherever I am. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Happy hunting.